It's official!
Welcome to another episode of Legally Unapologetic. I am your host, Octavia Green. Listeners, viewers, you are in for a treat today. Wait a minute. I'm going to stop the music. This week, we are getting deep. And I don't want the music to distract the listeners and the viewers from the sensitivities of this episode, from the topic, and from the underlying message. This week, I am sitting down with lawyer and entrepreneur Joy White. Now, Joy is a very, very successful attorney here in Atlanta, Georgia. She served in several different roles and capacities. She's gone from partner of a law firm, one of the biggest here in Atlanta to be exact. And she was also a GC at one of Atlanta's well-known universities. But despite having so much success in her professional life, Joy really struggled with a lot of personal trauma. Now, she's an award-winning filmmaker, y'all. And when I first saw the video, I was automatically captivated not only by her story, but her strength, her perseverance, and the ability to overcome some of the things that she endured. Now, the treat for you guys, this is a two-part series. The first half of this journey that I take with Joy, we're going to talk about her film. We're going to talk about her life as an attorney. And we're going to talk about some of the things that started to show up in her professional life that really made her say, hold up, wait a minute, let me take a pause and really address some of the issues. And then the second half, we're going to talk about the healing process. What does that mean? What does it mean? So success, what is it without self-fulfillment? Joy and I are going to sit down and tackle that exact question. Because as her story shows, until you do the work on yourself and the inner work on yourself and you deal with some of the things that you've endured in life, you cannot truly be happy. You cannot truly have success. And ultimately, those traumas will appear. And yes, sometimes even in our professional life. Joy's here to share it all with you guys. So without further ado, welcome to another episode of Legally Unapologetic. I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. Welcome to this week's episode of Legally Unapologetic. Guys, I am so excited about this episode. I am sitting here with a very, very phenomenal young lady, Joy White, who is an attorney here in Atlanta. And she just has a story, y'all. Like, when I can't even explain it. When you guys hear it, you're going to understand why it was so important for me to have her on this stage. So, Joy, first off, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I start every episode saying how I know my guests. This relationship is very new, like maybe 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Ironically, I saw your presentation doing a CLE presentation for the Georgia Bar, and immediately started going through who do we know, what are our mutual contacts. We ended up on one, and here we are. So I appreciate you receiving the call, taking the time to speak with me, and agreeing to come onto my platform.
Listen, I am honored to be here. I'm just as excited to be here. So thank you.
I appreciate you, sis. So we're gonna get into it. Today's conversation is going to be a good one. I know it's going to be a personal one, but I think that, obviously I've told you that I was drawn to you because of your story, and I think you have so much to share. So I wanna definitely get into it. So
all right, let's do it.
Before that, though, let me allow you the space and the opportunity to introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers. Give us a little bit of a spill of your background, legally, professionally, personally, whatever it is you want to do.
All right, so hi everyone. So happy to be here. I'm Joy White. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Flawed Masterpiece. It has coaching, speaking, and products all around supporting Black women and girls, and we'll get into the details of that, but that's a business that I started in 2020. I am also an attorney by trade. I have practiced law for almost 20 years. So went to Spelman undergrad, Vanderbilt Law School, started my career at King & Spalding, then moved forward to manage a few smaller law firms, and then was the general counsel at Morehouse College. So that's kind of the spill on my career. I am a single mom of 2 sons. I have an 18-year-old son and a 15-year-old son. And yeah, so I've been in Atlanta ever since I graduated, and I am really excited to have this conversation. I've gone through a lot of iterations of me, and part of the reason that I'm really excited to talk about this is my legal journey is very central to what I'm doing now, but it's part of the journey. It wasn't the end of my journey, and so I'm look forward to talking about that.
All right. So you just told us that, one, the resume is impressive. First off, let me give you your flowers. To go from private practice to managing law firms to then in-house counsel, and even now being a CEO of your own business. Again, I hint at your story. I want you to tell it. You, and I have to give you your flowers. You are an award-winning filmmaker, right?
Yes.
I have, a famous person on Legally Unapologetic, right? We done made it. But I want to talk about that short film because it's truly inspiring. It's touching. I think it's under 5 minutes. But even in those 5 minutes, you had me like, whoa, because you took it there. The name of the film is Finding Joy in the Journey.
A flawed masterpiece.
A flawed masterpiece. And, that speaks to everything we just discussed as far as you and your personal journey. But let's step back, right, and kind of talk about what some of the things you experienced, or some of the things that you did experience, and what you needed to explore in your own journey to.
So here's what's in the story, and here's what is in the box, right? So there's in my early childhood, so between 11 and 21, right, I was sexually assaulted and raped on multiple occasions between that time frame, between different people. When I was younger, it was an adult, so it was a grown man, and I was 11, 12, around there, and that continued, and then there were other people all the way to like forcible rape in college. So that's one aspect of it. I also was in a physically abusive relationship. I've been in more than one physically abusive relationship. That's in the short film.
Right.
And also something that is interesting that I'm divorced. I have 2 kids with 2 different dads. I have had an unsuccessful suicide attempt, which is what that part is in there. So the pills aren't. So the pills weren't like. So that's in the short film. I tried to
taking pills.
It was and I had to. It was funny. I had to work a lot to figure out how to artfully do snapshots in such a short period of time, because it was like, it's 4 minutes. It was supposed to be 20 minutes. We'll get to that, but it was supposed to be longer. But it's like, how do you piece this together? Right. And the point was to share this shame and this darkness so that we can now talk about these issues. My father died when I was 11, and at the funeral I found out that I had 9 siblings. Wow. And so I did not know I had siblings, and so I was 11, 12 at a funeral, learning that I had all these siblings.
While you're also grieving the loss of your dad.
So, there's other things too. So it's like, the point is like major traumas, like early, like really throughout my whole life. But then at the same time, I was driven. I wanted to be Claire Huxtable. And the whole time, I'm making straight A's. I'm getting scholarships. So there was like these 2 paths.
Right.
And so it's like, this is who I want to be. and I'm on this path, and then there's like this whole entire very significant part of my life that continues, and no one knows about it. I never talked about it. The only people who were aware were people who were like directly involved in a particular situation. So no one knew any of that stuff.
That had to be exhausting, because you are walking around with that weight on your shoulders for so long.
Yep. And then trying to raise kids, like as a single mom.
Right.
You know, it's so, yeah, at some point, you know, even with the unsuccessful suicide attempt, it was at a point where I'm like, this just doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Like, this is not working. But sad thing, right after that happened, I went to work the next day. Like, so it may have been a Saturday or Sunday. I went right back into work.
And put your head down.
Like nothing happened. I didn't get no therapy. I didn't which is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I'm like, I'm not the only person that has had them kind of experience. Unfortunately, whether it's sexual assault, rape, physical abuse, is a lot. We know the stats, right? There's a lot of women and children and, you know, that have experienced these things, but then people don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, you have to heal that.
Yes.
But like that does not, and what I was doing was like, I'm successful and I'm gonna go on this path and these things aren't gonna matter. I never got therapy. I never got any support from childhood all the way through to my 40s. Like no.
Wow.
And the only time I got help is when my son, like it started impacting me as a parent. I didn't know that's what it was. I was just like, this is too much. Like. Yeah. This is pushing me past my limit, plus the legal profession, you know, all of that. And it was funny. So even sharing that, it's like, so it was killing me. Like I was like dying in front of people, but I was smiling the whole time. Like no one would have known. Right. No one would have known except for the people that were specifically involved. So it's funny, the way I ended up with the film, right, is first, when God was like, I want you to share your story, because he had told me this a few years ago very clearly, like some straight, like burning bush, like tell your story. I'm like, I'm not doing that shit. I am not doing that shit. I mean, it was years ago. I mean, it was some straight, like burn. It was like, share your story. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And it's funny, and people can look this up. So like when I first was like, okay, well maybe I'll share some kind of story, I hired this guy named Nick Nelson. He's called the Brandpreneur. And I have his little video thing on my page. Like I hired him to help me like with my personal brand. Okay. And so it's like a day they do a photo shoot, and then he kind of talks you about what you're trying to highlight. So he takes people that are just professionals and kind of helps them explore like who are they more, so that they can be more intentional. So I do my brand day with him, and when we sit down and talk, and I'm like, so this is what I want to talk about. This is what I want to share. Because he records for content. He's like, I'm gonna have to turn this off. Like he's like, I'm not even gonna be able to use nothing. Like if y'all watch mine, you'll see there's no real content from our like coaching session, because he's like, this can't be on here. And it was very powerful and very helpful. But what he did say, he's like, Joy, I've never had anybody like want me to help them. He's like, you're already shiny. Like you've already accomplished things, and you kind of know how to handle your aesthetic, your personal brand. But like what you're almost wanting to do is like be less shiny. like
rip. What is that song by Beyonce? Pretty Hurt? Strip away the masquerade?
So he's pretty much like, you want to strip. He's like, that's some advanced shit. Like he's like, you can do it, but you're gonna need somebody who knows how. Basically, he was like, somebody who knows how to help you do that. And he didn't say this, but how I took it, like without ruining your reputation.
Okay.
Which was really, you know, and he's like, okay, turn lights back on, let's take pictures. But it was like, and that was the beginning. And I was still at Morehouse. That was probably 2017, 2018. That was the beginning of like sharing my story. But the reason I said that is because it took me a while to find the right people and the right support to share my story, because a lot of people were like, that's a lot. That's oh no. That's a lot. And it's not like they were like, oh screw you, but it's like that's a lot. So people were basically like, it's a lot. So where I started, I was like, I had my fiance at the time. He's kind of like a writer, so I was like, help me write my story. I was like, maybe I'm gonna write a book. So he helped me write it, and I had maybe like 10 pages single space.
Okay. Oh wow.
Right. So it's quite a lot. of my life, like
Right.
just kind of going through everything. And before I moved forward with the book, I was like, well, let me share it with a few people like that I know. And it was hard, right? So I shared it with a few people, and it was overwhelming for them. Like my story for them was like,
wow, you taking it there.
right. And like some of the men, particularly that I shared it with, were like, this is very disruptive for me.
Right.
Like, I'm confused. Like, it was convicting for them in some ways, which that's the whole thing. I know, right? I'm gonna get to right, but it was I was like, damn, how is my shit so traumatizing?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to share my story, but it's like it's throwing everybody off.
Right.
I had some girlfriends that like I started reading it and I couldn't finish it. So it was really like, okay, so it was like from the beginning, I got so much pushback. Like,
Right.
are you sure you want to share this stuff? Like, this is some bad stuff. I'm like, I know. Like, that's
But
the
I
point.
need to get it out.
It's my life.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess a book is too much, because it was like in
Right.
written form, it was like too much for people. So then I got introduced to a screenwriter, like somebody who wrote it like a short film. And so she wrote it up. And so then I was like, okay, well, maybe showing it in film and like is easier to digest,
Right.
I guess,
Right.
than just like reading it on paper. Another reason I did the film though was because when I launched the business, because I launched the business a year before I did the film.
Okay.
And so what happened is when I did those pictures and I'm like, fuck that, a lot of the people in my, environment were like, what the fuck is she doing? Like, because I didn't have a lot of narrative, right?
Right.
So there wasn't really a transition. It's just like, okay, she's general counsel at Morehouse. Now she's got these dark pictures. It says shame on her body. She's cussing. Has she lost her mind? She lost her mind? Like Joy has. I'm like, and it was funny to me, like, really? Like, I worked this hard to get to this point. You think I just like randomly just like there's no like
And that's the crazy part.
like
right?
nobody thought I thought through this.
Yeah, but that's the crazy part. It's like people don't just wake up and lose their mind. It's clearly there's something.
There was
going
something
on.
there. And what was hard, and the reason I did the film, because it's like I had a hard time getting people to support me sharing the story.
Wow.
Like every time I tried to, like, well, here's my story. Can you help me? Like, and even that's not what Nick was doing. But like from the very beginning, it's like, well, this is what I want to talk about. It's like, no, we can't. No. You're not gonna talk about that. You gotta find somebody else. Then I'm like, well, here's my written form. Can we? No, that's I can't read it. I'm sick. I feel nauseous. So I mean, like, so this is.
Wow.
I ain't even told them. I ain't shared it. And so it was like, damn. Okay, God, this is confusing. Like, my life is so overwhelming for people that they can't even get through the written format.
Right.
They don't want to, and it's not even like they're like being mean. It's just like, you really shouldn't tell people.
But why
Like,
is that? Why is that the default?
Like, you don't want to tell people. You don't want people to know this stuff. And for me, and there was something either in Brene Brown's book or something else that I read, and it said like shame, it thrives in secrecy. And the powerful thing is, as soon as you tell it, it disappears. Because it can't. Like, right, the whole point is nobody knows.
Right.
So as soon as you tell people, so it was weird because it's like, I'm trying to tell it. Like, I realize now this has been a burden in my life my whole time. So like, I want to share it. God told me to share it. And people's like, don't you tell that.
Right.
So it's almost like you should be ashamed. Like, stay there. Like, stay in that.
Stay in that box. Wow.
Which was just really a lot, actually, to process. And then it was so interesting for me when I finally, all these years later, wanted to tell it. And it's like, don't you tell that girl. Like, even now, still.
Yeah.
That's why I'm grateful that, we're here talking about that. That's why I was like, I'm going to put this in the middle of a CLE program.
Yeah, look.
like, listen, like, let's just put it in the middle of there. Like,
because it's a necessary conversation. I think too often, and I say this all the time, this is part of the legally unapologetic branding, right? I'm a lawyer. It's what I do. It's not who I am. And unfortunately, especially some of us Black women, we undergo so much and we shoulder and we bury, we bury it and we just keep going.
Which is what I did.
But to what extent? And to what, what's the cost of all that? Because at some point you're going to break.
And that is what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reason that I do this is because it's not sustainable, right?
It's
and
not.
So like you're younger in your career, like I'm 43, like I said, I have an 18 to 15-year-old. I've been practicing almost 20 years. I just started really doing this work 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out here just burying and going higher. That's the other thing too.
That's the crazy part.
So it's not even neutral. You're not staying at like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go here. I'm on boards. Now I'm in Leadership Atlanta, and everyone's like, oh, this is great, this is wonderful. Joy is so great, and that's what it was my whole life. My whole life was, this is great, and I'm like, okay, well, people like this. I want to be this person, and it's working.
Right.
So we just gonna stick with this, and we just gonna bury and stuff and. The reality that is not real. It cannot happen.
Right.
That's major trauma.
Right.
And multiple trauma. So one thing, I got eventually misdiagnosed multiple times. First it was major depression and anxiety, ADHD, then it was bipolar. So there was a season where I thought I was bipolar, because the therapists at the time did not ask any trauma stuff. So they basically just looked at the behaviors, right? Because I was being triggered in different environments, and so it was just like, oh, she's happy, mad, crazy. And not that bipolar people are crazy, but it's like that is a specific diagnosis,
right?
And I was medicated for it, and like accepted it, and spent like a years like, okay, I'm bipolar, and that actually was one of the things like that was a hit, right? Like, and it's like, okay. I'm gonna accept this. Only to later, when I got a really good therapist, it was like, you're not bipolar. You have CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's what people have that suffer multiple traumas over an extended period of time.
Right.
So, and it's not just one thing. So when you have multiple traumas, you have multiple triggers.
Wow.
So, and if you've never done any healing work around it, you may not know what your triggers are. So it could look to someone like you just reacted to something and you may not know.
Right.
That, for me, that's when I started breaking and cracking, is when I started having triggers and reacting to things in ways that I had no control over.
Right.
All the way up to disassociating in certain moments. So sometimes it was rage. It could be like just true rage, anger, or it's like I've disappeared, I black out, like I'm still here. So it was, and that's what your mind will do, right? Like your psyche will try to protect you. And so I just kept putting on more and more pressure.
Wow.
And so my brain and my nervous system was like, listen, this is coming apart. And even in that, I frankly still didn't have the support that I needed until years, later. And that's also why I'm sharing this, because it's like Black women, we
need to support each other.
We got to support each other. And we have to know that we deserve support. Like, that's a big thing. Like, I knew I was suffering, but I just thought that's what my life was supposed to be. And like, nobody said it, but then... And then I was winning, right? So it's like, this should be enough. Like, everybody loves you. And I'm like, yeah, everybody loves me. But then as I got, I'm like, it's
not enough.
And that is where, if you are a person that may struggle with suicidal ideations, like, you can get help, but you have to get help. Like, it won't fix itself. It's not something, it only gets more complex as you get older and your responsibilities increase. And I was just like, wow, like no one ever helped me with these things. Like, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Cause like, I had to find this, navigate it, come up with no one offered it to me. No one said you should get help. Like, there was times when I was going through a divorce and I would be out in places just crying, like visibly doing stuff that like where people saw it, and nobody said,
"Are you okay?" Nobody checked in and said.
And people care, but they weren't like, "You might need some help."
Right.
Like, it was just like, oh, like people care, but I did not know that I was that sick.
Yeah.
And I just kept going.
Yeah.
And even then, so it's like, you know, if you see somebody crying every day at work,
sometimes you need to check in and say, hey,
they might,
you might need to take a leave or take a moment or take a beat and figure it out.
Which is why I commend you so much, because it's like I didn't even consider taking time off.
Yeah.
Like I went to work every single day through all of these things.
Look, at some point, you know, and I think for me, at some point when I am being disruptive, not only to myself, but the people around me, I to your point, you disassociate. It was time for me to exit stage left. Not saying, you know, and I did struggle with the thought of, did I fail? I quit. You know, am I supposed to be a partner of a law firm? Can I, you know, do this? But it was also kind of like, okay, well, if I stay, I feel like I'm only doing more harm than good, because the work product is slacking. I'm tarnishing relationships, like good relationships, right? People that believe in me, people that supported me, but I'm cutting them, you know, because I'm so angry, because I'm dealing with whatever, because I'm drinking heavily, whatever it may be. Yep. And it's like, okay, I need to take a moment and take a beat. And I encourage so many people.
And that's huge.
To do that, because you never know. Like, we shoulder so much. And I think you said something earlier that I thought was, you know, kind of, I'm not going to say crazy because it happens so often. But we have to put on every single day like nothing's wrong. You know, I think back to this time where I was dealing with a family issue back in D.C. Mind you, I'm in Miami. Mm-hmm. My mom's calling me in Miami because my little sister, who's 16 at the time, is on the phone with her and she's being physically abused by her boyfriend. And I'm in my office, door closed, and I'm like, okay, I don't understand why you're calling. I'm in Miami. Call 911. If you need me to send an Uber or something, right, then that's different, but I'm in Miami and I'm at work, right? But then the call ends. I'm crying in my office because I'm frustrated, but then I'm texting a friend who's was actually here in Atlanta, and her words to me was, all right, meeting in 10 minutes. Wipe your tears. Time to go in there and act like nothing happened. And it was mind-boggling, because it's like, I did that. I went into that meeting, and you would have thought nothing had happened. Nobody knew that just 10 minutes ago I had this 911 call from D.C. And I'm wondering how many of us deal with similar issues.
And I think that's unique. And here's the thing. I'm a black woman. I can only speak on things of black women. Mm-hmm. But I know a lot of white women, white men. I know lots of people. My assessment is that black women deal with this dynamic more.
Yeah.
I think exponentially more.
Yes.
Where it's this, like, for whatever reason, whether we're the first or there's any host of reasons, but where these major kind of things are going on, and then we just have to put the face on and not realize, and even supporting each other in doing it, like, like, which I think is a thing to just dispel. Like, no, like, black women deserve to rest, to be healthy, to heal, to have all the support. Like, so I'm like, this shit is over for, hey sis, buckle up. No, go home, go take a nap. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Like, that's what we got to be telling each other, because we're still not telling each other that. Like, currently, we are still like, wipe them tears. Keep going. But then, and I'm just calling a spade, when things happen, because I'm sometimes very unapologetic when, God forbid, things happen, and people are like, oh, we didn't know. I'm like, lies. You knew. You're lying. Stop lying. Tell the truth. You did know. Like, don't let everybody stop lying. Yeah. And I'm not saying you wanted these things to happen, but don't sit here and lie. Right. Like, when people call you crying and when people tell you major stuff like that, and you know, and you're like, okay, it's like, let's address the issues. Yes, this comes from slavery. Yes, black women had to be stronger. Right. Yes, we could not afford to, like, fall apart. We were given birth in the field. Like, there is a reason it is slavery and it is passed down, but we are smart now. Right. And we know better now, and we understand, like, the generational shit. Take the time off. We are just as deserving as white women, Asian American women, Latina women, everybody else. Black women deserve those same things.
I get it.
And we, most importantly, have to know it for ourselves first.
Right.
Because it's like, yes, the world puts that stuff on us, but we be owning it and giving it to each other. Like, let's just, I mean,
call it how you see it. Like, I think this conversation is so timely. You know, before we started recording, you and I discussed it. I saw somebody sent me a reel, right? And there was this professional woman, and she was basically advocating for a career break amongst Black women. And it wasn't saying, okay, take the time, sit on your butt, do nothing, right? It was more so, take the time, get to know you. But get to know those other sides of you. You know, not the work you, not the billable hour you, not, you know, the corporate you or the polished you or, you know, the perfectionist that's sometimes expected of you in this corporate setting. But the spiritual you, the emotional you, the physical you. Tap into things, the soft you,
the playful you, the ratchet you, like whoever. I'm just saying.
I love it.
I got that one, but some people have that one. I have that one, and I'm like, that's okay too.
Yes.
Like that's not like with the Angel Reese thing. Yes. It's like, listen, girl. See, but what's so beautiful, even with us meeting, like one thing that I've learned is like, man, it's so great when you actually embrace all of who you are, because guess what? Then you meet your people.
Yes.
Because you can't actually meet your people if only one aspect of you is showing.
Right.
Because what I realized is once I got older, it's like I'm cool with a lot of people. I can be friends with everyone, but like the whole joy, the whole package, I had to first be like, I accept this, so that I could then be in spaces and be like, oh, I fuck with this person. Oh, I fuck with you. Yeah. Like, that's how I talk.
Right.
Like, that's how I've always talked. But the idea that I spent my entire adult life, myself thinking something was wrong with that. So even how Angel was like, they say I'm this, they say I'm that, I'm none of that. I'm like, yes, girl. No. I'm so glad that you know that right now.
Yes, at 20, 21,
I'm like,
she's young.
I'm clapping, I'm reposting it, because I'm like, it took me to be 40 to say I can cuss, and then and people still were like, I don't like you saying those words. I'm like, I don't give a fuck that you like me saying those words. Like, here it is again, and I'm still not talking about sex. Like, you know, but it's like, even I did a masterclass, fuck perfectionism. Do you know how many people reached out to me? I don't approve of this.
It's not, okay, maybe it's not for you.
But I'm like, wow. But it also reminds me, which is why you realize how brave it is for somebody like me, someone like you, like Angel, to really show up. But that's why you have to talk about these things, because you shouldn't have to be brave to be yourself. Right. Like, it shouldn't require courage to just be who you are. Right. But it does. Like, unfortunately, if we don't talk about this more and give space, there's all kinds of Black women. There's ratchet Black women, there's prissy Black women, there's rich Black women, there's poor Black women, and we're all fine, and we all get to be us, and we don't all have to like the same things. Like I tell people, Black women are not a monolith. No. Like, we get to have whole independent personalities. Yes. Just like everybody else does.
And we should be able to embrace that, right? So that's what Legally Unapologetic is about. You know, creating a space where Black women accept their uniqueness, their individuality, but then embrace it and celebrate it.
Because that's the key. It's not, because it's like, accept is like level 1. Then it's embrace. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah. And then it's celebrate.
It's celebrate.
Because that's what it's about. Right. And that's what it's supposed to. And it's like, you know, I tell people, you would get so much more from me with me not having to put on a whole layer of fakeness. Like, if I could just come in and do the job, you're gonna get so much more. Like, I tell people, you've never gotten what I have to offer, because 80% of it is me trying to perform.
Yeah, and it's fake. It is. How can I perform well if I'm uncomfortable and I'm not being myself? You know, and I know it's hard. I want to definitely acknowledge that we work in a profession where we are still trying to break down barriers where we can come and truly be ourself, right? But that's why we need to have these conversations.
It is, and it's funny, I spoke at something recent, maybe last year, and someone asked me, hey Joy, do you think you could have been this unapologetic and just yourself from the beginning and gotten where you got? I said, no, I don't.
No.
I was like, not at all.
No.
I actually think I had to be all that I was until y'all can't take that shit back if you want to. Right. It's too late.
Yeah, I'm already out here.
I'm too far and I'm done too. So you can, even if you wanted to take it back, you can't. I'm sure you probably do, but you can't.
Right.
But no, I was like, and that's why I'm doing this. And that's why I'm so glad you're doing this, because I want Black women who are in firms now to kind of be like, oh, maybe I start tiptoeing out. And then I want my white friends and men to understand, like, you don't want people having to like perform just to show up,
right,
because y'all not performing. I'm just,
that part. You come into these spaces, you get to be yourself, but yeah, I have to put on a fake smile and be taught to act
like you, like them.
Yeah, assimilate, I guess.
Yes.
And that's, not always the case.
And it's not necessary to do the work.
It's not.
It's not.
It has absolutely nothing to do with my work product.
I have a white partner that I'm friends with at a firm, and he came out to where I live when I lived in Southwest Atlanta. And one of the most profound things that I remember him saying is when he came out there, we went out to dinner somewhere, and he was like, I've never been anywhere where I'm the only white person. And then it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I was like, that's how I feel every fucking day.
Every day. Welcome to my reality.
I was like, me and every other Black person that comes into these different firms, that's how we feel every day. Did that feel a little weird for you? I was like, wasn't nobody doing nothing to you.
Right.
You were just there, but it felt weird, didn't it?
Right.
And can you imagine if you had to act like them?
Yeah.
In order to be deemed successful?
That would actually be kind of funny.
I was like, just imagine if you had to act like whatever being Black is, but if you had to do that in order to be considered successful and professional, I was like, could you do it?
Probably not.
Could you do it?
Probably not.
He was like, yeah, no. I'm like, right, well, that's what Black people are doing every single day in law firms and in corporate America.
Interesting.
I was great. I was like, this is wonderful. We should always hang out here. Like, this will be a social experiment for you every time.
That's funny.
Well, it is like, and I'm friends with folks, like, it's never been an issue, but it's like people, like, even for them, they don't realize how much of ourselves that we're having to hide.
Every day.
Just to be in those spaces. So it's like, you might fuck with me, but you might really fuck with me even more if you actually knew me.
Right.
If I thought it was okay for you to know me.
Actually know me, but we still have so much work to do.
We do.
We still have so much work to do because there's so many people that's still hiding the real them.
And I think that's why, it's important for Black people to stay in firms.
Oh, of course.
And be partners and then do this.
Right.
Like, to the extent, because it's like, until
a seat at the table.
You at the table and you're still there, it's not going to change.
Right.
It's just not going to change. We can do all this lip service, but it's like, at the end of the day, the fact that Black people, is 2023, that Black people still have to assimilate in order to be considered successful is a problem.
Yeah.
And it ain't enough DE&I, because in the real world, we should be able to be ourselves and show up in those spaces.
That part.
Because I'm professional, you're professional.
Yeah.
Like, when a white man says fuck at a law firm, no one thinks he's unprofessional. Like, no one thinks he's an unprofessional person because he says fuck.
Right.
But because I said fuck, it's like, oh shit, she's on the downward spiral. I don't know what's happening. She keeps saying the F word. It's like, and see, those are those moments. But that's why, because I'm not in those spaces in this moment, I'm like, I'm going to say it. And then people can be like, what she said.
Well, I love that. I love that for you. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this on this platform and in this space, right? To not only share your story, but also, kind of share your journey and how you were able to become the joy you are today, right? So we've said it several times. I need to break it down. Does success without self-fulfillment and self-worth mean anything?
No. Short answer is no. Like, if you have no self-worth, which again, note for the record, most people don't walk around saying, I don't have self-worth. Very few people do.
Right.
To be clear, very few people do that. So there's the inner work. That's why the inner work has to happen, because it doesn't sit on top. Like, I've never, in my entirety, I've never shown up as someone that lacked confidence or esteem. that's different than self-worth.
Right.
We're all, people are smart. Those are very different things.
Right.
And what you realize is people, I don't think anybody really ever talked to me about self-worth. Like, just, you exist, so you're worthy. Like, if you don't do anything, win anything, achieve anything, you're alive, you are fundamental, like, you're worthy. When I realized, I remember I was like, people think that? Like, which is when I knew I needed to get help. I'm like, you mean to tell me people think they're worthy just because they're alive?
Wow.
And my therapist was like, yeah. I'm like, oh, shit. I was like, we got real problems. I was like, this shit is deeper than I was like, this is bad. And the fact that was incredible to me.
Right.
As a grown-ass professional and a mother, I'm like, and it's weird because it's like, I think my kids are worthy because they're alive. But then to realize, like, damn, that concept even sounds foreign to me. And when I'm really honest and I think about my friends, black females, I'm like, how often are we really talking about if you don't win nothing, you ain't achieved nothing, you are amazing, and like they've done nothing? Like, how often, like, are we celebrating mediocre black women, below average black women? Like, can we just exist and do nothing and be honored and or just loved or so? And when I realized, oh shit, I don't even realize that's the thing. I don't think none of my friends know either.
Right.
I was like,
society doesn't teach us that,
And that's when I was like, I got to do this work, because this is so base.
Yeah, base level.
That you can have all these amazing black women doing amazing things, but even if they weren't doing amazing things, and it's like, if that's not common knowledge that your self-worth is innate, like, it's innate, like you were born, so you're worthy.
Right.
I was like, that's the deep, because I've not been taught that. Right. I don't hear nobody talking about that.
We don't talk about it. You have to strive for greatness and achieve certain things in order to be recognized, and that's the sad part.
And what we don't realize is, especially with children, but really just period, no one says, I lack self-worth, but that's what happens.
Yeah.
Like, when you only celebrate achievement and performance, and everybody agrees that that's what we should all be aiming for, like, what's the opposite of that?
Something to think about, right? Something to think about.